Hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia. I'm head of product at Alpic, and I'm one of the hosts today. So you've probably seen me on the invites. So actually, this is our first MCP Connect in London. That's why I wanted to start from a quick introduction, a quick story behind why we decided to run the series of events and what we are trying to achieve. And yeah, in the meantime, of course, feel free to connect on LinkedIn to follow all the various activities we are doing around the world to grow the MCP and agentic community. So just a quick story behind MCP Connect. At Alpic, we're actually providing the infrastructure to help companies expose their products to LLMs via MCP infrastructure and OpenAI applications. And we believe that LLMs are actually becoming kind of the new interface of the internet, and that products are going to be consumed differently in the future, in the very near future from now. So we believe that products are going to be discovered inside the LLM and that people are going to interact with them inside an LLM. And basically, enabling this to happen means that exploring and understanding what is happening in the industry is kind of our everyday job. And I think we can all agree that it is the pace of the changes that we are seeing is absolutely incredible. Honestly, I have never seen like 3 major announcements in a month from the foundational, like the largest companies out there. So for us, it is challenging to keep up to speed with all these, innovations, with all that is changing and happening in the industry. And I can imagine how challenging it is for people who are just in the industry itself, who are not, in these enabler shoes. So that's the main reason to have MCP Connect. Basically, this is a space where we handpick some of the most important insights every couple of months. And we want to share, we want to go deep into these insights to make sense of it together, to understand what it really means for builders, for technical teams, and for businesses. Then we also really like to share some examples of how people are already leveraging this technology for good to bring some value in the company, because there are a lot of, there is a strong sentiment that all these fancy technologies, they are there, but how do you actually, bring value with them? And we want to show how. And also, I think this is going to save some time to the teams who are experimenting or building with MCP and all these agentic interfaces, because some people have already made the mistakes. They went through this and they're ready to share. And lastly, so I don't know about you, but I think when I share my ideas with others, and I think this is a very human thing, so we are here to actually create this collaborative space so that everyone can talk to each other, can ask questions, just engage with our speakers. We have an amazing lineup today. That's the main idea behind it. So, enjoy, and I hope this is going to be helpful for you. Now, as I said, this is the first event in London, but actually this is our 5th edition. We started from 2 core locations about 6 months ago. We started with Paris and San Francisco, had a lot of events there. Now we regularly run those in London, so we're going to have a bunch of those in 2026. And we're going to open the new location in New York also in 2026. So again, if you travel across these locations or you have teams, in these locations distributed globally, just spread the word, because we really want to get it in front of the people who are going to benefit from it. Now, another experiment that we are doing right now is an MCP Connect Day. So the difference from this event is that this is like an entire day, right? It's much longer. This is more of a summit vibes. And we're gonna do the first one, the experimental one, this next February, February 2026 in Paris. So for now, we've opened the call for speakers. And you can go and check what are the requirements for the speakers. But yeah, if you feel like you have something to share, don't hesitate to propose a talk. Our team is going to review it, and we're going to be super happy to have you join as a speaker or as an attendee in Paris for this MCP Connect Day. It's always about MCP and agentic interfaces. So we kind of, believe this is goes together. So the theme is pretty much similar to what we're doing here with MCP Connect. Okay, so just 2 more minutes for me before I hand it over to our speakers. A reminder of who we have today. So we will start with Adam from Anthropic, which I believe is an amazing opportunity because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but you are the very person who works on the MCP. Yes, and so Adam is going to talk about the new paradigm of code execution with MCP that helps you scale your agents, makes them more efficient. But in general, don't hesitate to write down your questions, to save your questions for later, because I'm sure that there are a lot of interesting areas that we can talk about, like cloud skills, MCP applications that have been recently released. Again, there are a lot of changes. So we're going to do a full Q&A panel in the end. So yeah, just save your questions and let's discuss it together. Then the stage is going to be taken by Jordan from Zoopla. This is not the first time I'm hearing a talk from Jordan. And what I find, absolutely amazing about him is that he actually shows people how to bring value with AI and with all these new technologies in the real business. And he's been doing it successfully multiple times, and he's happy to talk about it. So again, I think this is a perfect example of the company which is just nailing it, and we all should learn from them. And then finally, we have our very own co-founder of Alpic and our CTO, Fred. He came here today from Paris. And yeah, you can recognize us by the ski goggles. So Fred is right there. And Fred, he's all about practical tips. What he's going to talk about is how to actually build effective UIs and applications, combining MCP with OpenAI apps and I guess MCP apps as well. And so, as I said, in the end, we're going to have this panel with all the speakers. So you're going to have time to ask your question. And the most important slide of all, the last one for me, is that we actually have a hard stop at 9 o'clock here. But if you would like to continue the discussions and having fun with us, please take a picture of this pub. This is the closest pub to Zoopla office, but there are a lot of other pubs here. So I really want to make sure that we all end up in the same pub and have a really great night. So yeah, thank you so much. Let's get started with Adam.
Hello. There we go. What a great time to be doing a talk about MCP. This is a birthday cake. We got it last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago for the 1-year anniversary. What's also been very exciting is of 2.5 hours ago, MCP is now donated to the Linux Foundation. So it is now proper open source. Really excited about this. This buzzes, that's exciting. What we're going to talk about today is code execution with MCP, the why and how. So a quick show of hands, who here uses MCP day to day, or a lot of you. And who's found the problem of when you add too many tools or servers, you get problems with context, etc. Basically the same hands. And so today we're going to look at why this happens, what is eating up all that context, and then how does code execution work and why does it solve some of these problems. So if I have an MCP server like my Google Docs MCP server, it's going to have a bunch of tools. It's going to have a get document, create document, update document, etc. And each of these tools is going to have a name for the model knows it by, maybe perhaps get_doc. It might have a human readable title like get Google document. A description, input schema, output schema, annotations, all this metadata about the tool. And most MCP clients, and in fact, if you look at our reference client, which we're working on improving, but our reference clients will add all of this information right at the start of your context. And so if your server has a bunch of tools, you add a huge amount of this information in. And it gets even worse when you add more servers because they all have their own tools that you're all adding into this context. And so as a real example, this is my Claude code with all my MCP tools installed. And on Claude Opus, I have 3.9% of the context left to actually do anything with, because MCP tools are taking over 100,000 tokens of context, which gets very, very silly. So that's one of the problems. But let's say you have the definitions and they're not too overwhelming. You'll also find that the tools are sometimes a bit underwhelming because they take ages and they're kind of expensive to run. And so let's say there's a workflow where we have a meeting, I transcribe it with Gemini and it's in a Google Doc, and then I want to add that to Salesforce. If I was doing standard tool calling, my model would make a call. It might return from the API a tool call block where it says, hey, I want to get this document. And then we take that entire context of that document and add it into the model's context. And this might be, say, 25,000 tokens for an hour meeting transcript. And so we've burnt 25,000 of our tokens. And then we have to call this, update Salesforce record tool. And we have to write out the entire document again. And that's another 25,000 tokens. So we've then spent 50,000 tokens and a bunch of time writing all those tokens just to do this basic thing, which should, a human would do, copy, paste, be done quickly. Additionally, because you're passing everything through the model, it can then mess up when it's copying all that information again. And so it's kind of funny, especially with small LLMs, they're really bad at copying word for word what you've said, and actually will fix spelling mistakes or change other things, which you might not want in this case. So these are our two problems. We've actually got context from tool definitions and from tool results. Give you a minute to appreciate that. So what is the solution that I propose? We give models an execution environment, and then we code generate some MCP stubs that they can call. So rather than the model calling MCP servers directly, we call the MCP servers, we find what tools are available, and instead of putting all those into the prompt, we might generate a file system tree of all our servers. So on the left here, I have a folder of servers, and for each server, that represents is a folder, and then each tool on those servers is a file on that server. And then inside these files, they act as simple stubs that might have, see this get document thing, which really just calls the MCP tool under the hood. But the model that can then understand, it's got all the information that it would have otherwise. It has the input schema, the output schema, it has the description, but it can choose whether it wants to read this file. Just like it can choose when you're using, say, Claude Code, it can choose which files it reads. It can choose which tools it looks at rather than looking at all of them. The other thing about having an execution environment is we actually do this already for many, many things. So if you're using, say, Claude Code, you already have an execution environment. It is probably the bash tool on your computer. If you've used it a lot, you'll probably use like GHCLI. And so it can already use tools on a command line in some environment that already has it can run. And we also have code execution environments on our API and on Claude AI, especially for things like we discovered LLMs are pretty bad at maths. And so we give them a Python environment where it can write code to do multiplication, do maths. And so why not give it an execution environment for calling MCPs? The other thing to note is when I say code generate MCP stubs, this is deterministically by the client. And so this is effectively a template that you can fill out with your MCP tool definitions rather than the model generating anything here. This is generated just from those tool definitions. And then this is actually what the model generates. So the model can then import these servers as if they are files. So it can import the G Drive server, it can import the Salesforce server, and we can pass these things through. And this solves our second problem of the tool result context problem, where we can actually compose these. So we're getting the Google Drive document, and then we're passing it into the Salesforce update record tool without that ever actually going through the context. And then, yeah, it would output this code, and our client would execute it the same way it would execute, say, a Python block to do some maths. It can execute this. This is TypeScript, but could be Python, could be whatever language, etc. So nice, internet works. This is an example I have with a London buses MCP. Sorry, it's a bit fast, but we have, when we start this client, it automatically code generates these stubs as basically the same format. It has the input and output schemas, it has the description, and the actual stub itself is something very simple, which just calls a helper that calls the actual MCP tool. Then when I put in a query asking when is the next bus coming to this bus stop, it actually has to use two tools. It has to find the bus stops near Old Street Station, and then it actually has to find what buses are coming. So it does this thing where it can like look over its file system to search for the tools rather than getting all the definitions up front. And then it can call this execute command, where it's actually written this code that it executes. And so you can see as it's executing, it's able to like slice the data it gets and also filter for what properties it wants. So then it's then getting less information back into its context. So again, saving that context to just putting the relevant results there. Once we have this code, which is, found the bus stop and also found the buses there, we can actually save this code because we know this code works. We've run it, it works. And so we can save this as a new composed kind of skill or composable tool. And so we can actually say, okay, now we have this one tool, which we give a place name. It finds the bus stops and the bus arrivals there. And we can like slowly build out this toolkit of these composed tools. And so as your agent starts, doing the same patterns over and over again with the MCP tools, it doesn't have to do that over and over again. It can save that, cache it, and reuse it. Very similar to Claude skills, and actually can turn into basically a Claude skill if you add a skill to MD. And yes, sorry, it's a speedy video, but 15-minute talk. So to recap the problems we solved, there was this tool definition bloat, which we solved by code generating to a file system, whether there's a virtual file system or something like this, and it can then navigate this tree and decide which tools it's actually going to look at. And then for results, result bloat, we fixed that as well because we can now pass the results directly between tools rather than using up putting them all through context. But there's more. So with code execution, you get a lot more power when you're writing in code in the same way that you'd realize that just being able to call tools is less powerful than writing code that could call those functions. And the model realizes this too. So here's one where if I want to post something, like let's say I'm waiting for something to happen in Slack. I'm waiting for a notification saying a deployment is complete in Slack. Previously, you might have to do something like go check the Slack channel and then sleep 10 seconds and then check it again and sleep 10 seconds, each time calling back to the model, using up context and charging money that whole time. Whereas if it writes this one script, it can effectively call the MCP tool as if it's a function, repeat until it's actually ready. And so this is one way that the model can discover it has better control flow, but also it can do things like pre-compute if conditions. So it can have a bunch of if statements, so it doesn't need to keep going back to the model to decide what to do next. If it kind of knows the path it's going to take, it can execute all of them. And there's a few others. They'll come back to me later. But the model is quite clever at being able to use these once it realizes they are just functions. Additionally, what I mentioned at the end of that video was once you have a reliable piece of code that works and does all the tasks you want it to with your MCPs, you can effectively save that and cache that, right? You can save that file as a new composed skill to disk and then start to build up a toolkit as your agent like learns what skills it needs, what tools it needs, and build this out. And then finally, I wanted to add a note on the registry. So this works great if you already have those tools installed. So in this case, I'm saying, please go and fix this bug based on Grafana. Works great. It can look over its file system, find that Grafana folder, open up the tools, and call them effectively. But if the Grafana server isn't installed, it's a bit screwed. And so what we can add is we can connect it up to a MCP registry API. And so there is now a open source standard for MCP registries where you can define these are the MCP servers available to be installed. And there is a official open source registry, which has over 1,000 servers and counting, which it can go and search, find the relevant tool and propose to the user, hey, I found this Grafana tool. Do you want me, or Grafana server, do you want me to install it? Be able to install that and then solve that user's problem. And again, this is just really an extension of that tool discovery loop and being able to think of tools and servers less as fixed things that you put at the beginning of your context, but more that it can discover over time and add over time. And I think that's everything. Thank you very much.
How about
Sorry, I don't know if I did something wrong.
for now, and then we're gonna save the rest.
Oh, one question. That's a little pressure on one person. I think you are very keen with your hand going up very fast.
Working, so maybe.
Code that we're executing that code somewhere, and the code might involve multiple tool calls. What if you want to have stuff like human in the loop, proving or not proving explicitly? That and all the other features that come with the data. Instead of having this kind of black box where you run the code until it ends and you don't know what happened.
Yeah. So the question is about. Let me check I've paraphrased this correctly. If you're getting the model to write code and you're just executing that code, you can't inject things like human in the loop. You maybe have less control over what exactly is happening there. Yeah. So I think you can still apply all the same permissioning and access controls, et cetera, that you'd want to over your MCP servers. As for human in the loop, you can still also where has it gone? The stubs we're generating, like this stub here, just calls the MCP tool directly, but you could change this, or you could change whatever the implementation of call MCP tool is to actually just like block on waiting for the user. And so while you're running the script, it like calls something that tells, okay, tells the UI to like get a permission from the user and like wait until that's approved and then approve it, and then it can continue on. Yeah. I mean, because this is like a async function or whatever, so it could just have like a blocking, like it could wait for ages for the user to approve it. It's a bit weird with this, but there's like lots of different ways you could plumb this up such that would work. Yeah, you could do that. Nice. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Looking forward for more questions later.
Bear with me a moment. Someone half jokingly told me that maybe half the audience would leave once Adam had spoken. So I'm delighted to see that everyone's still around for my talk. Where was that? I shall happily oblige. Just a second. Here we go. Yes, this is a lot of screenshots I have on the desktop. Let's see. There we go. Hello, everyone. I am delighted to stand in front of you all today to talk about how we're leveraging AI for search here at Zoopla. Anastasia already did a very kind introduction of me, but here's the obligatory introductory slide for all presentations. My name is Jordan. I'm the data science manager here at Zoopla. I've been here for about 2 years and 3 months, and I've been working with anything or everything pertaining to AI, data science, and machine learning. I'm currently embedded with the search team, along with Victoria, one of the co-organizers. Shout out to her. And my current focus is on how to leverage AI to enhance the search experience. It goes without saying that there is an enormous amount of hype surrounding AI. Everything ranging from it's going to be the undoing of humanity to it's the greatest wealth generation opportunity humanity has ever seen. And somewhere in between that, there's the murmurs of it's not quite what it's cracked up to be. And we're currently in a bubble. Earlier this year, there was a report, the Great Gen AI Divide by MIT, which I'm sure everyone here is already aware of, that stated that despite the $30 to $40 billion of enterprise investment, 95% of organizations didn't see any value from their AI pilots. And in the true testament to the rapid development in the AI space, a few short months later, Quantum Black published another report, The State of AI, that surveyed over 1,000 organizations about all their AI initiatives and produced a lot of interesting stats. One of them being the 39% report a measurable impact on EBIT. Hilariously, in the report, they're not clear whether that impact was positive or negative. I presume positive, but you never know. Nevertheless, a very important question still stands with all of this is how do we ensure we are amongst the organizations that do see a positive ROI? The original report did answer that question by stating buyers who succeed demand process-specific customization and evaluate tools based on business outcomes rather than software benchmarks, which of course is just a fancy way of saying that ensure that the solution is tailor-fit to your specific problem and you measure the impact on business metrics. Relatively straightforward, so let's use Zoopla as an example. One of the many problems we're trying to solve here at Zoopla is how can you help people find places to live? Arguably, it's the problem a property portal needs to solve. Tongue twister there. And a solution that immediately comes to mind is having a fully interactive AI tool that can help guide the user on the property search journey. So they may be met with this super slick design. I apologize to the people in the back. The text is going to be a bit small, but I'm going to narrate it, so fret not. But let's say you reach this UI and say you want to explore areas within Sheffield. The AI can take that information and then provide areas within Sheffield that are worth exploring. It can even ask follow-up questions. So the user might say, oh, catchment in an area of a good primary school, safety and proximity to a park are all important factors, which the AI can take this information here. I'm seeing people taking pictures. I'm giving them a chance. Take that information, refine the recommendation, and provide a tailor-fit recommendation that aligns with what the user was looking for. So once the user is happy, you can say, oh, show me some listings. Then show some listings that align with the user's preferences. And then the user can browse the listing in the user interface at their leisure. Now, I don't know about you guys, but as soon as I saw these designs, I thought, we have to build this feature immediately. And why not? It's got a great design, it solves our problem, it leverages AI. This is an absolute no-brainer. However, there's some important questions that do come to mind. One of them being, will people actually use this? It seems like an absolutely outstanding feature, but does it actually produce sufficient gains compared to the original way of looking for properties? Second question is, what does the tool actually need to do? Is area exploration enough? Is listing exploration enough? Does it have to do something completely different, like house price analysis? And of course, very important from a business perspective is, what is the expected ROI? Because building a feature like this here is time consuming. It might potentially be very expensive to run, depending on how you build it. And it's a very important thing to answer. And another very important question is, of course, is this even enough, considering the rapid development in the AI space? Of course, features are being launched left, right, and center. And a big one that's very pertinent to Zoopla was the launch of apps within ChatGPT, where one of the main business partners they're interacting with was Zillow. And for those who don't know, it's essentially the the American equivalent of Zoopla. And in the demo, we saw this super slick design of people interacting within ChatGPT, looking for properties with interactive UI components. And again, when we saw things like that, oh my God, we have to play with this. We have to play in this space. So we're kind of at a crossroads. Do we build out our own AI solutions? Do we play more in the external agent space? But of course, we ask ourselves, is there a way for us to have our cake and eat it too? I don't know why I'm building tension, because everyone here in the room already knows the answers to it. It's the model context protocol. My favorite thing about this image is the fact that I used Gemini to generate it. Yeah, and they don't support MCP. Nevertheless, we have our solutions. We can build out our tooling by leveraging MCP, by can power both our internal functionalities as well as the external ones. So we have all what we need to build our grand AI empire. However, again, we still don't know what our tools needs to do, referencing to one of the original questions. And which I'm guessing very pertinent to a lot of organizations is we don't have any experience with MCP. So how do we proceed with this? And the way we decided to proceed with this is through iterative product development in two different streams. The first stream is essentially the product development stream, where we have this grand vision at the end, and we're building ourselves towards that in iterations, where each subsequent iterations is based off the learnings of the preceding one. So we kick it off by building out a dirty MVP, putting that in front of users, gathering the feedback, and based on that feedback, we decide what the next version is going to look like. And from that, we build it in front of consumers, feedback, What does the next version look like? So on and so forth. The beauty of doing this way here is that as we build the iterations, we figure out what does the final solution actually do, because it might be vastly different from what you originally envisioned. And secondly, and very importantly, is that each individual iterations, you can assess the viability of your solution. Because you can see, you can test it at measuring the impact against the business metrics. Because you may find that actually it just doesn't produce a sufficient ROI. It's either too expensive to run, the benefits aren't good enough, but by doing it this way here, you can quickly pivot onto something else before you dedicate too much resources into it. In tandem with this, we're calling it the exploration stream, where we are dedicating time to exploring MCP and how that can be leveraged into the product space. And of course, this is informed by the product development one, where we may find after version 1 that, oh, we need to explore this particular component of MCP. And that information can then be informed on how we're going to build the next version of this functionality. That, of course, informs the next exploration, so on and so forth. We're currently at the precipice of deploying the second version of our AI search functionality. And we have done one round of exploration, and we're currently in the process of exploring MCP for the second round. And the topic for today, I'm going to show you what V1 looked like, what V2 is going to look like, and of course, I'm going to show you about the explorations that we've done in the MCP space. So without further ado, let's go into the product development stream. Now, in our case, we had this grand vision, but we thought to ourselves, what is the quickest and easiest thing we can build that we can get in front of consumers to gather feedback? And in our case, it was a simple natural language to filter conversion tool. The interface looked like this, where we had a main tab, which is essentially the usual search functionality on the Zoopla app. Then we had a separate tab the user can click onto. In this interface, they can then write what they're looking for, and a large language model gets called. It converts it to filters that are, excuse me, I just need to breathe. Sometimes you forget to breathe when you're up here. But yeah, so you have the filters that align with the search engine. The user has the option then to rate the filters based on the accuracy, which is a means that we decided to gather some feedback. And then the user can submit them and then see properties that align with those filters. We deployed this between June and September of 2025 on the Zoopla app only. And the main priority with this here was to get something out quickly in order to learn. So to that end, we decided to cut a few corners. One of them is we limited to for sale properties only, so we excluded any rental properties. Certain filters were excluded, the lesser used ones. And finally, we decided to deploy to all app users, circumventing any E/B testing. And the reason why we decided to do this, the first two were more for the sake of speed of delivery, getting something out quickly. And the third one is primarily linked to what we wanted to learn, which was, what are they trying to use this tool for? What kind of queries are people making? And in order to gather as much data as we possibly could, we decided to deploy to all app users. But of course, I'm stressing the importance of measuring the value on the business metrics. So naturally, we are going to go look at engagement metrics. But considering this is an MVP, it's going to take a backseat to assessing what it needs to do. And getting out the engagement metrics out of the way before we get onto the truly juicy bits. They are as follows. We saw about slightly shy of 2% of for sale sessions on app that leveraged this feature. And when comparing the ones who used the features to the ones that didn't, we saw a 65% uptick on session duration. We saw an 82% uptick in properties viewed per session. And we saw a staggering 150% uptick in conversion rate to sending a lead. Pretty outstanding figures. However, we need to caveat this. As the feature is built, it was in a separate tab, so people had to opt in to use. So there's a natural inherent bias in the data due to early adopters. So we have to take these results with a pinch of salt. Nevertheless, we do consider this to be enough evidence to support at least doing it for a few more iterations. And as a side note, having a star system isolating the filters here wasn't particularly useful. So if you want feedback from users, we would recommend to have something more explicit way for the users to do that. I'll let the front take a picture of it. Righty. Now, we wanted to know what does the tool need to do? And another way to phrase the question is, what does V2 need to look like in order to get us to this end destination of the grand vision of an interactive tool? And the way we answered this was that we looked through all the queries and we used various natural language processing techniques to see what are people looking for. And for the nerds in the room, we used n-grams, BERT topic with various embedding models, as well as named entity recognition to identify some key themes. And the themes we identified were commute and accessibility. So users were searching for like easy commute to Warrington or houses near Heathrow. They were searching for vague attributes like quiet place to retire or with a sea view. So features that aren't covered by our pre-existing filters. And the third one is amenities, such as good transport links and outstanding schools. Now, before we proceed to how we treated these themes, I want to talk about the importance of having guardrails. Because when we launched this feature here and looked at all the queries, we saw that lots of different types of queries that you have to account for. The first category I want to talk about is privacy concerns. So here's a couple of queries that do have that. So I want to take it to the audience and see, does anyone take a stab at why these types of queries are particularly problematic? Special category data. Whoever says special category data defers a promotion? Yes, indeed. These are special category data. Special category data. Because you may want to link the queries here to a user, and as soon as you do that and you have a queries like this becomes special category data. And if you don't have very, very good reasons to process that kind of data, you shouldn't go anywhere near it. So it's very important you have guardrails in place to protect yourself from that. The second category are users that ask for particular features that are totally kosher, but in a very interesting way. So here's one of the gems. These are legitimate queries that they use the features, by the way. This is not me making it up. Here's someone looking for an affordable home, I presume, and they did it in a very colorful way. The second gem here, someone I presume was asking for a fixer-upper. Now, you may have noticed I have a slight Scottish twang to my accent, so naturally I was aghast at someone suggesting there were crap houses in Scotland. But then I realized that, oh yeah, this is probably how I would ask for a fixer-upper. So here we go. The last category is interesting requests onto themselves. So maybe there's queries that actually your AI tool shouldn't be able to respond to. So here's one query that we saw where someone was asking for particular recreational activities. So of course, depending on the branding of your company, you may want to respond to this. Well, the second query, the second one, an interesting request one, pertains to a type of commercial property. Now, Zoopla does account for commercial properties, but not all kinds of commercial properties. But we may be missing a beat here. Nevertheless, I hope this does stress the importance that you have to have guardrails in place when you're building out an AI feature like this. Because if you build a feature where a user can ask for anything, they will ask for anything. Back to what V2 should look like. We have our themes. So the features that we decided to incorporate, or we think we should incorporate, are the ability to search on vague attributes, the ability to search based on proximity/travel time to locations, and amenities. Sorry, I just spoiled it there. So this is what we decided to do for the next deployment of our AI search functionality. Excuse me. First one is we want to update the UI to make it more streamlined. And this is for two reasons. One of them, of course, is to have a better UX for the users, but the second one links to the issue that we had with the first deployment of the inherent bias in the measurements. So instead of having this separate tab, we're going to integrate this into the main search functionality and have a more proper A/B testing to then assess how are people engaging with this feature so we can have a more proper assessment on the impact on the business metrics that we care about. Second, we're going to add travel time, so allowing users to search like 30 minutes commute from London Bridge. And we're going to add semantic search, so allowing users to search without being constrained by the filters. So this should be able to account for vague attributes and features that are not being and excluding keywords where, like in case the estate agents haven't written the exact keywording that you're looking for. This feature here is going to be available in V3 or the next deployment, so keep your eyes peeled for both versions. Now, before we move on, I just want to say that this time around here, we decided to postpone leveraging any MCP for servers to the first round because the exploration that we did in this realm started halfway through when we were working through this. But this segues very nicely into what I'm sure everyone here cares about, which is the explorations in this MCP world. Now, I'm probably preaching to the choir when I'm talking about what got jazzed up about MCP, because it is a very, very powerful framework. But I want to talk about the things that got us particularly jazzed up. And in the past 2 months, we saw huge announcements. Yes, these came in the past 2 months. It's bonkers how quickly this space moves. One of them, of course, being apps within ChatGPT. Sorry, that was the wrong button. And the second one being MCP Apps. And one of the reasons why we're so excited by this, of course, is the introduction of interactive UI components in the AI tools. Because this is one of the keys for us to realize our grand vision of having a fully interactive tool that can help users find home very, very efficiently. So with this excitement, we thought we need to gain expertise and experience within MCP as quickly as humanly possible. And the way we did that was through an oldie but goldie approach of having hackathons. not sure if anyone's had a hackathon, but if you haven't, it's a great way for to get your hands dirty with something. It's a great team building exercise, and it's a lot of fun. And true to the community building spirit, Victoria ensured that we had some kick-ass images from the event, so shout out to Victoria. And we in the search team, we had 2 hackathons. The first one was simply just exploring the basics of MCP, so building MCP servers, clients, how do they interact with each other, etc., etc. The second one, hilariously, the hackathon was scheduled to talk about or work on something completely different and outside of AI, but this was scheduled for the week that ChatGPT or OpenAI announced apps within ChatGPT. So naturally, we did a hard pivot and decided to get our hands dirty with that. Then on the day of that particular hackathon, we split into 2 teams. One of them was responsible for building out or rendering listing cards. So here a short demo of someone like referencing the tool itself, writing the area Camden, submitting it, and making the tool call. Wait for it. And then we see some listing cards being rendered into the interface with images and interactive buttons. The second one was responsible for rendering a map. Similarly, the tool is referenced. We have a query like find me properties for sale in London, submit, and then we see a map with pins populating London. Now, I just want to stress that this was built in less than 4 hours, which I think is a testimony to how well designed the model context protocol is and how powerful it is. You can get a prototype up and running pretty quickly. But of course, after all this exploration, we get even more hyped up. So we thought, okay, what's the next natural thing that we should be exploring? And considering Zillow had already done it, a natural question would be building a public-facing Zoopla MCP servers to help people search for homes through ChatGPT. So that's what we're currently exploring. So how can we build out these UI components to help people search through ChatGPT? And of course, the astute of you would have asked, or we would ask, why are we building out this feature on ChatGPT, considering apps isn't available in the EU and the UK yet? And considering that we have MCP apps, but halfway through the work where we started doing this exploration, that's when MCP apps got announced. Another testimony to how incredibly quickly things move. And of course, we're banking on apps within ChatGPT being available soon. Last time I checked a couple of days ago, and of course, this might have changed entirely, ChatGPT has 60% of the market share in terms of AI assistance. But with the recent announcement of MCP apps, I'm sure Adam can corroborate this here as well, is that there is a collaboration between MCP UI, Anthropic, and OpenAI to standardize the process of building out UI components. He's nodding, give me the thumbs up, boosh. So, before I leave you on to the next speaker, I'm going to show you the demo of our current public-facing MCR. It's not public, but our MCP server that we want to make public, where you reference the tool and you may make a query like looking for a 3-bedroom flat in London. You submit, call the tool, and here you see an interactive map indeed in London with pins. You can interact with the pins. There's a carousel at the bottom. You can interact with those. Click the view listing. It opens up a separate tab where you can explore the listing at your leisure. And you can go back to it. ChatGPT, of course, recommends next step of how you can refine your search, which of course you can do within ChatGPT. So you can say, oh, looking for property in North London with period features, and why not add a budget of 850K, which is a steal by London standards. And here we go. The tool gets called, and we see a map indeed in North London with the pins. You can interact with the pins. You can see quickly that the price is indeed 850 tops. And beautifully, ChatGPT describes each individual property that it did return, or some of them, stating where we're highlighting it did indeed account for the necessary features and lets the user know. This work here is a monumental effort from all the engineering team and the search team, so shout out to everyone who is here in the presentation and the ones who are with us in spirit. That sounds like they're dead. I'm sorry, they're not. They're very much alive, thankfully. Nevertheless, a massive shout out to them and all the monumental effort that they have done with this. So, before we go on, quick recap. We spoke about the importance of having a business problem to solve, because this will be your compass. Build solutions through iterations and assess the viability through business metrics at every single step. We spoke a bit about ways of exploring MCP. Hackathons is a great shout. And tying this all together is how Zoopla are integrating AI into search, where we're looking at building our own AI search functionality, as well as looking into having a public-facing MCP server. Thank you very much for listening.
Are you ready to make one question to answer one question?
Absolutely. Go. Oh,
Okay,
several
so
minutes.
I
Nice.
think I know who was the first one. Let me. Here you go.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Yeah, hi. Sorry. So the first part without the ChatGPT, it's an AI search tool that you built for the properties. So I could potentially do the same with the Google AI or Perplexity or something. Could I? Or like, how is it different?
Are you talking about in terms of the MCP server that we're building?
Not MCP. The first part, the tool that you have right now, AI search tool for properties, like how is it different from searching it at Google in Google AI or Perplexity or something?
That's an excellent question.
Thank you.
So in the terms of this also relates to why we would want to have a public-facing MCP server in the first place as well, is where the calculations of finding properties that are aligned with your preferences that you're looking for can happen on the Zoopla side. Because we have the data, we have all the information about the listings. Because if you were doing it through Google or through Perplexity, they would have to do a big, massive Google search, would have to load the context of each individual listings into the large language model, and that would have to decipher which one is aligned. But through this kind of tooling here, we do all the magic behind the scenes. We have the database, we have all the information. And when you're saying, oh, I'm looking for period properties, and then this here has a period property. Correct. Oh, there's another hand. Do I have time for another question? I think we have.
We'll do it at the panel.
Yeah, we'll have to save it for the panel, yes. But thank you very much.
Does it work? Yeah, great. Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Fred. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Alpic. And tonight I'm going to share with you some tips about building ChatGPT apps or how to bring UI into MCP. Does it work? Yeah. Just like Jordan said, OpenAI released ChatGPT apps a bit earlier this year, back in Dev Day. It was beginning of October. And they are currently packing in two waves. First, apps that are going to be available on ChatGPT. First wave that was announced during Dev Day with 7 first partners, including Zillow, like Jordan mentioned. And another wave coming by the end of 2025, so hopefully before the end of this month, before starting to integrate new partners in the coming years. The talk I'm going to share with you today is going to focus on ChatGPT apps, but everything I'm saying can be transposed to MCP apps as well, because they are very close in terms of implementation. There will be a link at the end of the presentation to a specific article that we did that compare difference in implementation between MCP app and ChatGPT app, but there are not much in terms of what I'm going to share today. One thing that makes ChatGPT app really great, compared to previous iteration of search marketplace like the GPTs from back in 2023, if some of you remember, GPTs today are dead. But two things that makes ChatGPT apps and MCP apps stands out for me is the zero-step discovery and the UI. Zero-step discovery means you can invoke an app inside the chat discussion with your favorite model without requiring you to previously install it using some kind of interface where you would have to search for the app and make sure that you connect to it. So starting a conversation, you can invoke Booking or Spotify or Zillow inside the conversation and directly ask your prompt, and you would get it inside the conversation. The other nice part is the addition of UI to complement conversation, text-based conversation, in order to better express results and give better controls to the user, much better than text in some instances. The talk of today is going to focus on the UI part, not on the discovery part. And we are going to first take a closer look at the concrete implementation of how you bring UI into MCP. A more detailed implementation of Skybridge, which is the name of the runtime of OpenAI to render UI in chat. And then we will take a closer look at 3 different patterns that you must pay attention to when developing ChatGPT apps. Individual relevancy, synchronized navigation, and follow-up iteration. Just before we continue, how many of you have built ChatGPT apps, apart from the engineering team? Okay, so a lot of learnings to come to take from this talk today to build your next ChatGPT app. Don't hesitate to come after if you have additional questions. Let's start back from the beginning. How does MCP work? So basically, you have a user conversing with a model, and this model, through the host, is connected to an MCP server, providing additional capabilities and ways to inject additional information into context. When the user sends a message, a chat completion request goes to the model. This completion request includes a list of tools available. If the model chooses to use one tool, the host is responsible for actually making the request to the MCP server, injecting back the response from the tool into the context before completing the inference. When you bring UI into the chat, you basically say, I want sometimes, as a result of a tool calling, display, in addition to the text contents that was written by the tool, some widgets that will display additional information. Those widgets are always rendered as a result of a tool calling. They are rendered isolated in an iframe. You can have them inline, picture-in-picture, or full screen. And we go a little bit more into details about that. And all the assets that are used inside this ChatGPT iframe are heavily cached, so you will face some issue when deploying new versions of your application. When you have UI into the conversation, you don't have anymore only one way for the user to interact with the model, which was the conversation. You now have a new way, a new surface of interaction, which is the interaction with the widget. The MCP server exposes features as tools, like it used to do before UI was introduced into MCP. And the new widgets, assets that are being used to render the interaction part inline, are exposed as MCP resources, which was a primitive that existed before the introduction of UI into MCP. So there is nothing new inside the MCP specification itself to support actually rendering widgets, UI widgets inline. The way we do the connection in between the tools that helps the model have additional capabilities and the widget is using metadata. When listing all the tools available on the server, some tools may display a specific metadata, which is basically a URI pointing to a resource, which will be the one to use to render the UI widget. Those resources are of a specific type, an HTML type, and they will be used as the entry point of rendering the UI widget. So when we took a look back at our initial sample, basically you have 3 additional steps when using a tool responses as a trigger to render UI within the conversation. Is basically getting the actual asset through the MCP server using a resource read method and using the content that is returned from this call to display the widget in conversation. When you display the widget in conversation, this widget has access to a few properties that are exposed by ChatGPT, properties that are very useful when you're building this kind of widget that are related to the user itself. For example, what term is he using? What is its language? Where is it located approximately? You have some information about the layout. How is the widget rendered? Is it inline? Is it full screen? So that you can adapt based on those parameters. And you have some state property available, which basically mostly contains the tool outputs that you can use to actually display dynamic information into the widget, but are additional info that we will take a look at a little bit later. In addition to props, you have methods for the widget to be able to interact back with the outside world, interact back with the model, to be able to send some messages directly from the widget, to be able to interact with the host, to request, for example, to go full screen, and to be able to interact with the outside world. So you can have widgets making additional tool calls to get additional information from the MCP server. That concludes the SkyBridge API interface. Does I still have everyone with me? Okay, everyone's all right? Good. There are 2 main challenges that you must bear in mind when developing ChatGPT app, and that we will use to go through the 3 different patterns I will expose just after. The first one is complementarity, and the second one is synchronization. So it's very important because you have those 2 surfaces available between a user and an application, the conversation with the model, and the widget with the UI that you render in chat to make sure that you don't display the same information in two locations and that those two information are always in sync with each other. Let's start with complementarity. When you render your widget for the first time, you use the output from the tool call as an iteration props that you can use inside your widget to display certain information. What people do most of the time is using the structured output, structured part of the tool responses to inject all the props, all the properties that will be necessary for their widget rendering. The problem when you do that, here is an example of a simple Pokédex application on ChatGPT. Basically, the tool responses contains information about the Pokemon to display. When you do that, you actually have the Pokemon displayed in the widget area, but you have ChatGPT actually exactly saying the same things that you see in the UI widget just above. And you don't have complementarity of information. You're using two spaces inside the window to say exactly the same thing. And one very important thing to keep in mind is that you have more than one property available on tool responses to actually direct the content of your tool responses either to the UI. You can do that using the meta property, and only the UI will receive the props. The model will not see what you have inside the meta property, or only the content property, and then you will have only the model seeing the result that is inside content, and the widget won't have access to it. I wanted to showcase a good usage of this in a small demo. So here I have an application of Time's Up. Time's Up is a game where you have to guess the other person's cards. It's very hard to play Time's Up with ChatGPT without relying on the ChatGPT apps because he knows the card that he wants you to make guess, for example. So he's cheating all the time, basically. So relying on the ChatGPT app, you can actually use a tool to bisect the information, displaying the card on one side for the user, and only giving the idea of the game to ChatGPT to try to guess with another tool call on your server what you are looking at without knowing actually what you are looking at. Let's play a game. So I'm praying for the demo god, as usual. Oh. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so decided to call a tool. If you click on this small bit here, nice, you have a tool debug console that I won't be showing because it's closing as I open it. But here I have a card, and if I want to make ChatGPT guess, I have to make him guess a lion. And let me check if he's cheating or not. It's a green vegetable. So what I did is basically sending the illustration URL and the name of the card to guess inside Meta and just the idea of the game to ChatGPT. And every time ChatGPT wants to make a guess, he's calling another tool on the MCP server with his guess and the idea of the game. And this is the ChatGPT application that decides if the guess is correct or not. So he's trying to guess broccoli, and of course it was not broccoli, so it's not correct. So ChatGPT is not cheating, which is good, which was the initial intent here. And it was made possible because we were splitting the information that has been sent between the restricted content, which only contains the ID, and the metadata that contains all the rest for the widget rendering. Okay, let's continue. Up, yeah. So that was for the first pattern, complementarity. This was an extreme example of separating meta from content to make sure that you don't display the same thing, but you must use it in your ChatGPT application to make sure the model doesn't repeat itself, doesn't repeat what's written, what's displayed in the UI. Another pattern that we can take a look at, which is synchronized navigation. Here I have some example from Zillow. Sorry, I didn't have access to the Zoopla app at the time. I am pretty sure you won't have those issues that I will be pinpointing here. You have built-in support for navigation. So when you display a map like this one, and you let the user navigate, clicking on points on the map or clicking on results on the left pane, you actually update the view on the right side of the widget with detailed information about the selected property. This is very nice, so you can navigate inside the UI, but if at some point you ask in the follow-up conversation to ChatGPT some additional information about the apartment you are currently having a look at, it will mistakenly select some other random apartment from the initial list of results that was returned to your widget. So you're looking at an apartment which is in 2290 from San Francisco apartment, and is speaking in a completely different apartment when you're asking question. And that's because the model doesn't have context about all the navigation you made to actually end up looking at this particular detailed property here. On one side, you use navigate to update basically the property that you're looking at, but you must also use another API that is available in the Skybridge runtime, which is a setWidgetState API that allows you to save state for later rendering if the user comes back to the conversation 2 months later, but it's also a way to pass back information from the UI widget to the model. So when you do look at the detailed information of a single apartment somewhere, it's important to use this API as well to let the model know that the user is currently looking at this specific property. Last pattern, and after it will be time for beers. There are 2 different surfaces to interact with ChatGPT app. And especially when you want to start an interaction, you might find yourself in a dead end sometime. So here again is another example from the Zillow app. After triggering the initial rendering of the widget, asking here for places in San Francisco for rent, which are close to public transportation. The model that is used behind rendering this specific widget actually used all this natural language to facet and make sure that it only returns properties that are close to public transportation. All those filters have been conveniently displayed on the app to show what you are looking at, actually, in terms of filter applied on your selection of results. But there is a small text that says, if you want to update this filter, please use the conversation bar to ask for a new search. And the reason they did that is because if you want to initiate a new search from the widget itself, you would have a different pattern, a different path than initiating it from the conversation. If the user basically says, okay, finally, I'm not really interested in something that is very close to public transportation, it will trigger a new tool call, it will trigger a new widget rendering with this filter that is not part of the equation anymore, and you will have all the properties, also the one very far away from public transportation. If you want to have the same behavior using a trigger in the widget, you need to actually make the model aware of the new tool calls that you made inside the widget so that it keeps track of the filters that you've removed. And in order to do that, you need to use 3 different APIs that are available on the Skybridge runtime. One to make sure that you keep the widget state, same as previous one. One to send a follow-up message to make sure that it was exactly like triggering a new step of the conversation, as if the user was inputting something in the conversation prompt. And a use state if you want to keep things that are only related to the UI widget itself. All those patterns are quite hard to remember, quite hard to implement. So we decided at Alpic to build an open source library, an open source framework, an open source composable constructs that you can use inside your ChatGPT apps to help you develop better those new type of applications that have the particularity of having these dual surfaces that you must get complementary and synchronized. Feel free to check it out if you want to give it a try. And if you want to start building a ChatGPT apps, a good way to get started is to do a hackathon or to play along. We are actually organizing advent calendar of ChatGPT apps. We're still open until tomorrow. So if you want to submit a last moment app, feel free to do so. There is cool swag to win and some cash as well. In Alpic, we do much more than what I presented today. We do mainly hosting of ChatGPT app as well, with a lot of feature built in. I'd be happy to tell you more about it while drinking a beer if you want to. If you want to find out all this information, the last QR code is going to bring you actually to this presentation. If you didn't have time to take some picture, there's my LinkedIn as well and Alpic website. And happy to have a chat. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, one question for now and the rest.
Hey, Charles.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Awesome. You managed to solve the problem of aggressive caching, especially if you use ChatGPT as a client.
Yeah, in development, inside Skybridge, we have automodule reload stuff that allows you to develop in ChatGPT without caching. So we've used that a lot to develop ChatGPT application. Otherwise, the feedback loop is hell. But you must know if you're asking the question. So we have a module without module reload. It's basically built on Vite, and it packages every asset, and it allows you to have live rendering of updates inside ChatGPT. We also have an emulator, part of Skybridge, which allows you to run outside of ChatGPT without a model, just to have plain rendering. Yeah. There are two scenarios, I would say. First one is you have a very good faceted database, and you can basically put every parameter available on your facet inside parameters of your tool to make sure that the search is as filtered as possible compared to the query that was initially asked by the user. And you trust ChatGPT to fill in those parameters inside your tool correctly based on the user intent. Or you do the agent mode MCP that was first coined by the Sentry CEO, I believe, which is basically having only one tool on your MCP server. It takes in a single natural language query, and you have a full-blown inference model running behind the tool to make sure that this query is translated to actual usable results back to the general model. Two approaches are fine. If you have very faceted content, would say go first for the one where your tool is a reflect of the facets that you have on your database. If you don't, worst time investing in the second one, but it's much longer road to production when you do the agent mode style of MCP server. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah.
The way we do enter your API or
No, you're welcome.
You can stay on the stage, Fred, because we're doing a panel right now. So you're going to be accompanied by Jordan and Adam. You can keep your mic because you'll need it to answer questions. So yeah, I'm going to be running the mic. Raise your hands whoever has a question. I'm going to try to remember who was the first one.
Hi, it's a question for Adam. Is the MCP protocol definition, brilliant, it's in the Linux Foundation now, coordinated with the Claude UI? I'm thinking about sampling support, which is not present in Claude UI, which would be kind of useful to us.
Yes. So the question is around, MCP spec support in Claude AI is patchy in places. Like sampling is an example, elicitation is another. And then there's also like new steps as well, like the tasks proposal as well. That's not quite there yet. I think this is like a constant battle we have to try and get all the features into all our surfaces. We have Claude AI, Claude Code, the Messages API, and then people building on top. My short answer would be we try to add these features in, but we also try and balance it with like reliability and other improvements.
But my question wasn't about when.
Okay.
It was about will Claude UI, the standard desktop UI, support it? Because obviously it provides a way for a bad MCP server to use up the user's tokens by getting them to make the request. So it's more a question of, are they committed to this sounds like a good idea, it's in our roadmap, or are we going to see MCP server spec being very wide and then individual chat UIs choosing subsets for maybe security or cost reasons or whatever?
I think the intention is to ultimately support the whole spec in almost all our services. Yeah, but I think it's a long road because there's so many things always in the spec. Yeah, but yes, eventually, yes, that's the answer. But then also we'd still give users control over what they do want and don't want. So they'd still, if there are security worries about sampling, for example, presumably we'll have a toggle to disable that.
Cool. I think there was one question.
This is a question for Jordan. How are you thinking about context? So I saw you obviously ran the query of like, how do you find period houses in this area? Obviously, the query is only as good as like whatever data exists, like whatever the person put into the field, but it might still be homes that are period homes. So is there an overall approach for how you're thinking about how to collect extra bits of data on properties that people don't necessarily specify?
Is this for the main AI search functionality or the MCP server? Right. So if I understood your question correctly, in terms of accounting for features that the user hadn't specified or the state agent, the user hadn't specified. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of specific attributes the estate agent hasn't provided, currently we don't. So it's more about the information that's currently being fed into either of the AI tools is dependent on the information that they have provided us. So we take that data, we have various models that also tags the properties with attributes that they have. But unless the agent either submits a photo of whatever feature that they have or they describe that they have that particular feature, we don't. But I think one way you could address that, of course, is having third-party data sources that you can also supplement the data, and that can be used to check whether the properties have the features that the user may be interested in.
Next one.
Also a question for Jordan, sort of related. So I'm guessing the ultimate aim of your agent would be to potentially substitute the actual people agents. I mean, as in a person would, in very broad aspect, a person would use the AI tool to sort of narrow down the search extremely and then actually go into the person and have like 3 choices. But how do you account for example, for information that is sort of word of mouth only, such as, for example, dodginess? It's not like an estate agent is going to put, oh yeah, this is in this dodgy area, don't buy it. So how do you sort of account for that, and how could you compensate it using your AI search tool?
Oh, that is a very interesting question. It does go to the heart of any business that I have, where you're trying to manage the tension between, in our case, customers and consumers. That's the name that we're using, or customers and clients. So it is a very tricky question. And it is a balance that we are always trying to strike with trying to provide as much information as we possibly can, but also respect the fact that estate agents also want to be able to sell their properties and also talk to the users. In terms of answering your question of how we manage that, I think currently, I think I'll actually have to think more about that before I answer. So let me have a think about it and I'll come back to you later. Apologies.
You were scared to have people leaving after your talk, but you're getting the most of the questions for now.
Adam, a question to you. So context execution, I didn't quite understand whom is it for. So if I'm building a public MCP server, which benefit do I get from using it?
Yeah, so code execution is a client capability rather than a server capability. So if you are building an MCP client, so if Zoopla builds its AI chatbot and it wants the ability to call a bunch of other MCP servers, so it wants to be able to fetch into your Google Drive to fetch details about your perfect house streams that you've had since you were 7 and you've been building and you want to put that in, you might want to use code execution there. I think there are implications for both client builders and server developers. So I think the client builders, it's obvious, build this into your client. For server developers, I think this changes a lot of the recommendations that people would give around building MCP servers if you expect them to be used by clients that support code execution. So I think traditionally, people have said, build your MCP server, focus on high-level tasks that it's going to complete, and don't just wrap your API and actually maybe like restrict the number of tools you give it because it will cause us overload. I think because code execution solves this, and actually you want these granular tools that you can compose and the agent can decide exactly how it wants to compose, maybe it's fine if your MCP server is largely a wrapper around your API or is much more granular or has far more tools, or the tool descriptions are much longer because the agent can decide exactly how much it's going to explore those things and use them. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool.
Okay.
Hi, Adam. Another question for you. Comes to code execution and this idea of having skills for Claude, which I almost think of as caching, right, across long time horizons. And especially as programs get more and more complicated that they're generating, they're not necessarily always going to be correct. They might work for that particular run, but maybe in the future they fail. Have you thought about ways in which maybe they can auto heal, or there's adaptations that can be made to support that kind of use case?
Yeah. So we were talking about this briefly off stage, but obviously, the model can just write code that's wrong in the first place. And there's a load of safeguards you can put in there. Like, I think one of the reasons I showed it in TypeScript in the demos is it's strongly typed. And if you put the input schemas, output schemas that are very easy to convert from the JSON schema types into TypeScript types, you can like type check your entire program and then see that all the tools work correctly, or like should at least go together correctly. This also means that one of the great things about MCP is that you can change your tools and API definition, and your client should adapt. If you're saving these skills, having strong types allows you to regenerate the stubs and check that the changes to the MCP server haven't broken your skills, and then you can have the model go in and fix them if they are problematic. I think you can still basically take all the learnings from most software engineering as well and apply it to the same code scripts that your agent will write. So we've talked about types, but of course you can like still write unit tests if you want to against your skills. And also because they're all kind of stubs, you can like mock them out very easily if you want to like properly give it the ability to do that. And of course, like when it executes and if it hits an error or something, you can send that back up to the LLM and say, hey, this is a problem, rewrite the code, fix it, and like recover. But that's probably what I'd say on those.
I'm just trying to understand the future. So we've got A2A protocol, agent-to-agent protocol, and right now that can only be used internally. And then we got MCP. So it's really great for businesses that have a lot of data to kind of exhibit that out into the world to LLMs. I do see a future where every brand is going to have an agent, because it's not just going to be MCPs. They're going to have an agent because LLM has to query it, and there's going to be a back and forth conversation. I'm just wondering that in the world of protocols and technology, what do you think is in the way between the today world and the world that we're going to see, I don't know, 1 or 2 years, or what's your prediction?
Yeah, always very hard to predict exactly how people will use these technologies, especially because they're so foundational and we see them being used in so many weird different ways. I'm really not sure. I think at Anthropic, we are much more a B2B company than a B2C company. And so we think much more about the use case of enterprises within an organization using MCP servers to unlock employee productivity. So for example, if I plug in the Gmail, Gcal, Google Docs, Slack, Asana servers, I can ask Claude to do a bunch of my work that I would otherwise have to do, and that's going to be a boost to me. Or I can ask it to help me prioritize what should I be working on, which is, I think, quite different to the consumer use case of usually you're like thinking about more narrow tasks, or you have like a more diverse dynamic set of tools where like you might interact with like 30 different businesses and services, rather than, you work in an organization which has its like core set of productivity suite that doesn't really change day to day. Whether people will expose agents and then talk to other agents, possibly. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be speculating probably at that point, so I don't want to get too far into it.
So question to both Adam and Frédéric. How often do you say you come across agents where you just go, oh, this could have just been hard-coded. It would have been way more optimal and way better. And there is no point to actually it being an agent.
The question's on agents that could just be hard-coded rather than
Yeah, essentially somebody has gone to the effort of using ML and AI because it's where the money is at and where the buzzwords are at. But in the essence of it, there was no need for it. How often do you actually say you come across that?
I think I come across that occasionally, where basically people have used AI for the sake of being able to slap AI on the packaging of something. Yeah, I do think like the stat we mentioned earlier about like 95% of AI projects failing. There's some methodological problems with the study, but also there's like, it's kind of true. The other classic stat is like 95% of software projects fail. I think a lot of it's the same thing of, are you actually solving a problem for your users? And are you making sure that like, you're measuring this, improving this over time? And if AI is not necessary to do that, you don't need to do it with AI.
I think a lot of people, sorry, I'm gonna let you answer as well, a trap that often falls in, well, is, oh, let's just use AI to solve this problem, when a bog standard machine learning model would be way, way better for it. It's kind of like, yeah, the invention of the plane didn't make the car redundant, so we still use a car.
Plus, if you look at a technology like MCP, you have a lot of deterministic code execution behind MCP servers. You can still say your company is an AI company if you provide an MCP server, but you don't actually provide a foundational model or even a specified a reinforced learning model. You just provide a better wrapped API with nice decorator, nice descriptor, nice parameter that you have actually tested against some other company foundational model. But you can still call yourself an AI company and not provide any inference capabilities, any even traditional machine learning model capabilities, and still be part of this AI revolution. Most of the MCP servers that we've developed with Alpic don't use agent mode. And it's way cheaper also because you make the client bear all the cost of inference. You don't bear it yourself, which is very nice.
Quick question. So we have GPT OSS. Are we going to see Claude OSS? And if yes, when?
I probably can't comment on this, unfortunately.
I'm hoping for it, just saying.
I was on a flight recently. I thought, oh man, you know how they have movies on flights? It'd be really nice if they have like an AI inference server like on a flight.
Oh, that'd be wicked.
Right, some open source models.
There's a startup idea, Chanuki.
This question is specifically for Fred from Alpic. First, congratulations on having the Skybridge framework live. What was the main motivation to build a framework on such a feature that is not stable yet? And what should we expect in the upcoming weeks?
The initial discussion was the name coined by OpenAI to release the ChatGPT apps was the Apps SDK as software development kit. And we were lacking a software development kit at the release time. So we felt that there was a void to be filled. Plus, we built a few and actually handling the native window.openai, which is a OpenAI Skybridge interface, doesn't feel very much like 2025. So we started building in projects, React hooks, components, context provider, state management utilities, hot module reload servers to speed up our development processes. And from those projects came repeatability. So we thought, okay, maybe it's better to offload some of them to a dedicated library. We decided to open source it to make more builders available, to make it easier to actually build apps. Another way that motivated the start of Skybridge, which is much more recent and that will continue driving the development of the framework, is the existence and the ever-growing quantity of slightly different protocols. Like, it would be good to converge effectively on one dedicated set of specification, but at the moment we are still using 3 different implementations: MCP UI, MCP Apps, and Apps SDK. bridging the gap between those specifications is part of the job we want to accomplish with SkyBridge. Same thing that we had with Polyfill back in the day, where browser had different implementation of MDN and eATF features. We want to aim at filling those gaps, allowing builders to build once and be present in every of those platforms. At least that's the forthcoming goal for SkyBridge.
Question for you, Adam. How is Anthropic dealing with prompt injection? Because I think MCP does allow for prompt injections too. Is Anthropic working on that? Because I feel like it's a big vulnerability.
Yeah, I think we're very worried about prompt injection, especially with MCP. MCP, I mean, without MCP, often your like AI program is like not very interesting because you know the kind of information it's going to get is probably from a trusted user, etc. MCP exposes this whole world of exciting things, but also exposes you to lots of like bad things that can come. There's like a defense in depth approach we're taking with this. So I think first, just in the models themselves, we are like training them to be very robust and refuse a lot of these attempts. We've introduced like special training in our RL and supervised training sets to basically make sure that it is resistant to these kind of attacks. This prevents about 90% of attacks, but obviously there's still that 10%. And so when you use the Claude API, we run classifiers against the input and output to check for prompt injections and monitor that. And then also we provide guidance as well as build safeguards into our actual apps that try and like get the like last sliver of that like 1%. All this said is there's like always still this sliver that we haven't quite eliminated yet. I suspect that will stay around for a while, just by the nature of like whenever you have untrusted input and like you are trying to process that input in some way, there's like going to be some risk that like weird things happen if you do that. I think the question to ask in a lot of these situations is like, rather than viewing it as like a fully deterministic software system, is comparing it with like an employee or something, where the like human version of prompt injection is like social engineering, where it's like there's like differences as well, where prompt injection is often more deterministic on a model than it is a human. Like you can't keep tricking the same human like 10 times in a row, which you can with the model. But then comparing this and deciding for your use case, is that safe? And so again, thinking back to like the B2B enterprise case, if you are building an internal chatbot that like just is for your employees you probably don't need to treat as like hostile actors that are really going to try and break it. Or if they do, you can look at the audit logs and, you know, fire them. And that's probably like going to deter people enough. And so you have to make these cost benefit trade-offs with prompt injection.
Thank you very much.
How do you feel about questions? Do we do 2 more maybe until we stop?
I'm happy.
Thank you so much for the talk, by the way. And I just have a very general question. I don't come from a technical background. I did the business. I work in finance, but like my question is a bit more business related, because like now I see that, you know, like the word of, you know, making startups, like bring idea to like fully development and kind of being able to scale it became much easier, you know. And how do you see like the incoming future, you know, on, you know, because the market is super overcrowded, and I guess that in a moment like that is important, probably like to focus on a niche, know your niche, and kind of develop tools that are perfect for the niche, kind of, you know, maybe being able to work on the 20% of that big text don't cover. But I don't know, do you have any insights? What's your vision about the upcoming future, about, you know, bringing an idea to life?
I have some thoughts if you guys want to start.
I'm not good at giving advice on what to build. Like you said, it's much easier to build today without all the expertise that was needed to develop a product, mostly software development skill. So it's much easier to get from idea to first working prototype, being able to be tested on the market to see if there is actually traction. So there is a steeper, a very faster learning curve at the beginning to go to the first iteration. but I've yet to see production ready in the long term product that was only the outcome of vibe coding without any technical knowledge involved in the deal. So it's a quick start, but you still need to come back to a more traditional way of building at some point later on. And that may be one of the reasons why we say there is 95% of startups that are AI, in the AI space that are going to be dead in a year, is because it's much faster to go from 0 to failure than it was before.
Dovetailing on that as well, just being able to build a prototype, it's exceptionally quickly, but building production scale solutions, I think that's still a hurdle that you need technical expertise to do. It's a very interesting example. I'm not sure, does everyone heard of the app T? So I see someone who's started T, yeah. So a name came from spilling the tea, and the intention behind the app was to make online dating safer for women. So they can then go on this profile, create a profile, and then say that, oh, this dude here was particularly dodgy. He did X, Y, Z. Don't match with him on this dating apps. But I think the system was vibe coded because all the data, all PII of all the women on the platform was stored in an unsecured database. So it was this massive leak of 50,000 women having all their PII, driver's license, photos leaked on the internet with the tagline, they were talking shit about men. So they had the intention of making dating safer for women, and they did the exact opposite. And I think this is an example of, yeah, production scale solutions are very different.
Hi, yeah, I have a question for Adam. So my question is about evals. I'm curious how you guys do evals. For example, for something like code execution, imagine the user is using the Zoopla MCP server, for example, and they're going through 3 tool calls, one to search a bunch of properties, the second one to look into a specific property and its details, and maybe the third one to submit a request for a viewing. In that case, with code execution, we saw you can kind of chain those tool calls, not get all the context, the data from the intermediary steps into the model context, which is great. But how do you know that the model will be better at writing that code rather than doing traditional tool calling, especially when you're not just doing the evals for a specific MCP server, but for any MCP server? So in a spectrum that goes from is based off of vibes to like, we have very sophisticated pipelines to do this. Where do you stand and how does it work?
So within Anthropic, we have evals that have tested this specific thing, and code execution pretty reliably just does better with Opus 4.5. I think with previous models, it was more of a toss-up because there's some balance between the model just makes mistakes when writing code or like doesn't quite understand how to write code or use this thing that way. Whereas with Opus 4.5, it like basically always gets how to use it. And it's like purely a benefit in terms of token usage and cost and time. And so the main metrics we look at when we run these evals are like number of tokens. Like, can you minimize the number of tokens because this like reduces cost and like increases speed and like reduces inference load for us. And then also like percentage of tasks that have actually been completed successfully. And we see like improvements on both pretty reliably across a wide range of different evals and different tool sets. And so we're pretty confident just to say like, if you're using the frontier models of today, and you also should remember that like today's models are the worst models we're ever going to have, then like probably you should just use code execution for almost all tasks, as long as you have an execution environment. Like the only downside, the only case where I'd say maybe don't use code execution is if you're only dealing with very small models that are very bad at writing code, or you like cannot run an execution environment for some reason or for security reasons. Like this is just not possible. But otherwise, I'd do it.
Cool. I think we can stop here just for the sake of time. Let's give a round of applause to the speakers. Thank you so much, everyone.